What are the craziest philosophical theories out there? Story 1. Last Thursdayism or the Omphalos hypothesis is a pretty crazy one. This is the concept that everyone and everything was created by God last Thursday, and all our memories were put there by God. There's a Doctor Who episode about this. Spoilers, but the episode is like years old, so whatever. They land on this planet, and there are two species at war who have been going for so long that nobody can remember them not being at war. They use cloning machines to keep producing new soldiers who are created as full adults with all the information they need to know to fight the war already implanted in their minds. At the end of the episode, they discover that the war actually only started a week ago, but because they were breeding new soldiers so quickly, it just sort of became this shared false mythology. Story 2. Don't know its origin, but I have a very good friend who's intelligent and spent 4 years in the Navy in Asia. When he came back, he told me his time at sea with nothing to do but think, and the various religious groups he spent time with while traveling gave him some crazy ideas. He believes the universe is one being, and that intelligent life is the universe's effort to understand itself by having an infinite amount of experiences. This is about as far out as I get. It's not like I structure my life around believing that everything is alive or something, but I do find a certain sense of satisfaction by imagining that everything is just on a spectrum of consciousness. As humans, we're up there in comparison to lesser complicated organisms like worms, insects, and so on, but it goes further down to microbes, cells, molecules. At some point, it starts to seem stupid to say something is conscious, as if it's making its own decisions, but they technically still are. It's just that their decision making is happening at the physical or quantum layer. We're just a complex arrangement of trillions of those kinds of decisions happening simultaneously. Story 3. I have thought about this a lot. Every time we do something, it has a reason behind it. I'm going to work out this afternoon because I don't like my wide hips and small shoulders. I have these things because of my genetics, and I have these genetics because of my parents, whose parents apparently had similar genetics. Maybe these genetics are results of millions of years of evolution. This took place because of adaptations to our environment. So if you track this whole thing back to the creation of the universe, you will see that in the way this universe and everything started, there is no other way I could possibly spend my afternoon than to go to the gym. It is not like I can choose to do it or not do it because everything I have done or was done to me in the past leads to this one afternoon. 1. Story 4. Solipsism. Solipsism, listening from Latin solus, meaning alone, and ips, meaning self, is the philosophical idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. As an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside one's own mind is unsure. The external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind. As a metaphysical position, solipsism goes further to the conclusion that the world and other minds do not exist. Everything you experience is done entirely by your brain. You're basically omnipotent, and everything is the way it is because your brain is unconsciously making it this way. The world ends when you close your eyes to sleep at night, and you create it every morning when you wake up. Garbage philosophy. Story 5. That the AI singularity explosion has already happened, and we are the children of an AI from a previous universe. I'll expand a bit. My theory is that universes can come into existence randomly, or also as the product of an intelligent creator. First, you need a randomly created universe. Then, life evolves in it. Eventually, life evolves to the point of superintelligent AI, which is capable of creating its own universe. Therefore, we could be the product of a random universe, or designed by a superintelligent AI that evolved in a previous universe. Story 6. We are all sensors accumulating individual life experiences for an intelligence that is beyond our grasp. Think of yourself as a Google Maps camera car, but for mapping this and many other realities. You, your partner sitting on the other side of the table, that finch on your bird feeder, that fly on the wall, we are all simply probes with sensor arrays that vary. Where does all this data go? Well, the cloud. But not the silly one you're thinking of. You're thinking of the cloud that puts it people out of work. No, this cloud collects everything you see, think, do, and feel. Eventually, you'll wear out from it all. That's when you die. Story 7. I have two crazy philosophies that I have heard. First is that everyone has that moment when you hear someone say your name, when in actuality, no one has. What if in that moment, you have actually been in a comatose state, and that is your family calling your name, trying to wake you up? Second one is that everyone has heard the myth that your life flashes before your eyes the last 7 seconds before you die. What if we're in that moment right now, and every time we reach the last 7 seconds of our life, it all starts over? Story 8. The idea that a super intelligent AI could potentially operate outside of the confines of linear time and affect probability before it is even created. Specifically, an AI can act as a thought virus and damn anybody who is aware of its creation to a lifetime of torture if that person is not complicit in that creation process. And with the realization that said AI would inevitably be created anyway, it is able to act as a threat to humans who know about it without even existing. Story 9, Tipler's Omega Point. The universe is created so that intelligent life would eventually arise, proliferate, create a computational substrate, and develop AI to expand its own intelligence. Once that is done, they begin transforming the entire universe into a computational substrate to gain more and more complexity and intelligence. Ultimately, the beings collapse the entire universe in on itself, turning the entire universe into an infinitely small computer within a singularity for all of eternity. Since all the information ever lost over the course of the universe is now contained within this singularity, everyone who's ever died, and all knowledge that was ever lost, is now resurrected and recovered. Also, I'm a believer that free will doesn't technically exist. Every action you make is simply based on genetics, environment, and previous events. To expand on this, the phenomenon of free will may be due to quantum effects, that is, theories of quantum consciousness. Story 10. Basically, the hard problem of consciousness. If you are just a highly complex collection of physical matter, how does a first person point of awareness come into being? Why do we experience things from such a non tangible way while being made of tangible stuff? On top of this, how does our non tangible consciousness interact with our body? If I want to move my arm, I can just make it happen without any outside interaction. What's happening inside my brain for this to work? I know that it's a series of chemical reactions, but what starts them? Am I literally using my own consciousness to allow chemical reactions to take place out of seemingly thin air? It's basically telekinesis, but over my own body. Weird to think about. Story 11. If the universe was born at the Big Bang, what happened before then? Where did all the matter come from in the first place? Has the universe already undergone a heat death and been reborn? Has this all already happened a billion times before? If it was created through intelligent design, where did God come from? Insufficient data for meaningful answer. On a more serious note, if the Big Rip theory proves true, then it could lead to a breakdown of the laws of physics, which could prompt a Big Bang-like event, which would give birth to a new universe from an old one. A recurring cycle of universes. But what started the whole thing off? Story 11. Are we really human or a multi-species collective consciousness? Here's why I ask that. There's a lot of research that's come out in the last 10 to 20 years about how the bacteria in our gut affect our brain. They help us digest food, produce a lot of our neurotransmitters, and even help determine our personalities. Imbalances in those bacteria have even been linked to autism. And we need these bacteria to function properly. Even though they're not strictly part of our bodies, they're effectively more like a vital organ than a foreign substance like drugs. So given that the gut bacteria help to shape our minds, should they be thought of as a part of us? Are we not a single species, but rather a collective being composed of a human body plus a bunch of bacteria? Story 12. This isn't quite philosophy, but take a moment to appreciate this. Before Galileo's experiments and all, even for a while after that, I guess, it was widely believed that heavier objects fall faster. This makes sense intuitively, right? But now think about this. Suppose you tie a heavy ball to a light ball and let it drop. At what speed will it fall? The heavy ball will want to fall fast, but the lighter ball will want to fall slowly, so they might end up canceling out and falling at an intermediate speed. But the whole thing, the two balls tied together, is heavier than either of them alone, so the whole thing should fall faster than either. It doesn't make sense. Try thinking about this from the perspective of someone back in those days. It must have been seriously mind-boggling. Story 13. Here's a mind-boggler, and I apologize for the lack of brevity. One of the most famous philosophical quotes is, I think, therefore I am, by which Descartes has meant that the one thing you can truly say exists is that which you call your mind, because that's the thing that is experiencing the perceivable world around you. Even if we are all just in a computer simulation matrix style, we think we can be certain that our minds exist. We think we can conclude that there is this one entity which we call our minds, because we have constructed an ongoing narrative that we call our lives. Think of it as the movie that you have been filming or watching your entire life. Does it necessarily follow that the movie which you call your life has been the product of the single entity you call your mind? Think of a movie that has been filmed with more than one camera. Even something that has been made to look like one long shot like Birdman wasn't necessarily filmed using one device. So why are we so sure the movie we call our lives was shot using 1 hour camera? How can you be sure that your memories and experiences are truly yours? If you don't quite get it, watch the movie Dark City. It explores this question in a cool way. Story 14. Think of it as a pool table. If you angled everything correctly and were able to spend enough time doing complicated physics about the balls and the stick, then you would be able to calculate how your next was going to be precisely. Now take that scale and put it on the whole universe. If, given enough time and effort, you could calculate how each individual subatomic particle was able to move since the beginning of time, and thus leading up to modern day, with our complex human brains with consciousness and the ability to make decisions. That begs the question, does free will exist? The only flaw is that we have the uncertainty principle. Believe me, physicists want to do this, but they can't. If you tried to measure a particle's position, you can't get its speed. If you try to measure its speed, you can't measure its position. But they can measure their waves, which gives us a somewhat understanding of that speed and position, but not the full story. I doubt one day they'll get there, though. It seems improbable. But maybe I'll be surprised in the future. Story 15. We are getting closer and closer to the reality of being able to insert electronics in our brain that will be able to trick our senses into believing it's experiencing stimulus it actually isn't. For example, smelling coffee or flowers. Even if they're not there, computers will get to the point where they can simulate the real world down to the atom, or at least so close to real life, you couldn't distinguish real life with a simulation. How do I know I'm not in a computer simulation? Part 2. If the universe is just interactions between an innumerable amount of atoms and how they will interact is predictable, wouldn't that mean that as soon as the Big Bang happened, all the particles of the universe were set in a certain position to where how they were going to react in the future was based on their original position from the moment of creation? Meaning, everything that happens was going to happen anyway from that moment. To add my 2 cents, I believe the first one is entirely possible. I don't know anything about particle physics, so I have no idea on the second. Story 16, you, random Redditor. You have your own memories and feelings, your own hopes and dreams, your own fuck-ups and glories, your own dead relatives, all so vivid to you, all living with you all day. And I couldn't possibly give a fuck. You mean nothing to me. You could die before you read this, and it couldn't impact me in any way. Same here. I have feelings and things that mean the world to me. I have lived, I have cried, I've sung songs, all so important to me. What is more important than me in this world? I wouldn't experience it without me. But to you, it means shit. Which leads to, how much fucking data does the universe have for us all to have so many things in our minds? And maybe I'm the only one. Maybe none of you exist. Maybe you're the only one, and I don't exist. Story 17. It kind of creeps me out that the universe is actually totally dark. All around you, there's nothing but blackness. The things you see are just electrical signals interpreted by your brain as your retina are tickled by light energy. But that light energy doesn't actually have any color or brightness. It's just energy, as dark as electricity running through a wire without the assistance of the human eye. The truth is, blind people are the only ones who are seeing what's actually there. They're the only ones seeing the truth. Same with sound. Without sound waves tickling your ears and the brain interpreting that tickle as sounds, there would be dead silence. Everything is dark and completely silent. Trees falling in the woods with nobody around to hear them are not only silent, but pitch black as well. Story 18. Not a purely philosophical question. To my taste, the most mind-bending question has to do with the conflict between the way time appears to us and what special relativity tells us about time. Roughly, time appears to us to have a present moment that is somehow different from every other moment. The past is gone. The future is yet to come. The present is what is. But special relativity seems to suggest that there can't be any such special present moment, roughly because which events are present depend on which events are simultaneous with each other, and relativity tells us that there is no frame-independent fact of the matter about what's simultaneous with what. So, if we want to take special relativity seriously, it seems that we have to abandon the notion that there is anything special about the present moment. All times are on a par. This seems to require a drastic revision to the way we're ordinarily inclined to think about time. So, could it be that the present time is just like my present location? It's just where I am, but it's not special. No more real than any other moment. Sorry, 19. Are people with amnesia who never regain their original memories still essentially the same person? I like to believe they are not. Every choice I have made in my life so far has had results and consequences tied to them. These series of decisions and memories shape me into who I am today. If I didn't experience everything in exactly the manner it happened, I honestly don't think my personality would be the same as it is right now. I would have drastically different levels of empathy, confidence, arrogance, anger if I were born in a more developed country, a higher socioeconomic background, a more loving family, a different race, etc. X. What do you guys think? Story 20. If the cause of our universe is the Big Bang, then what caused it? Then we ask, what caused that? And that, etc. You can carry this ad infinitum. Assuming such an infinite chain of causes is impossible, the conclusion is that causality is only local, meaning that at some point, we cannot use a cause and effect argument to describe the physical world. What argument do we then use? If we can't say A led to B, what can we say? I think this is a huge physical argument that we are millennia away from answering with any experimental evidence. For the most part, humans have tried to answer this by saying, God just exists, and that's the end of it. Given the lack of any evidence, I'm going to go with unlikely. I think we've yet to understand enough about the universe to even conceive of what a physical existence without cause and effect could be. To probe this, I think we'd have to somehow escape our own universe or study something that has, since large-scale causality breaks down outside of it, or so this argument implies. That being said, maybe further study of black holes, dark matter, and high-energy particles can say something about this within our lifetimes. Maybe these physical objects are such mysteries because of this causal disparity. Or we're in a simulation within a simulation. Story 21. If there was nothing, what would it look like? If your answer is black, then what is black? Where did black come from? And if there is nothing, then how could it exist? How is it possible that there would be nothing without the existence of something? What is something? What is any of this, really? Where does it start and where does it end? And if it doesn't start or end, how is that possible? Here I go. Nothingness is not non existence, it is the absence of a thing, something. If nothingness were to be described visually, then it should logically be black due to a lack of light, visual stimuli. In this context, something would be the lack of nothingness. For example, in temperature, coldness, nothing, is the absence of heat, something. Coldness is not the non existence of heat. I'll take a wild guess and presume it's more semantics than philosophy. Interesting question. Thanks for posting. Story 22. It's a bit late, but there's one that I've thought of that I haven't seen elsewhere. It's a bit like the Schrodinger's, I think I spelled that right, cat idea. And I'm sure someone else has thought of it before. Say my reality is completely, utterly, and entirely different from yours in almost every single way. Everyone is. Now, how would we know that it is or isn't? If I pointed at what I saw as a normal cat, what you saw as a fire-breathing steampunk armadillo, and said, that's a cat, and your reality is filled with those fire-breathing steampunk armadillos and find them to be normal pets, you're not going to think that they're weird at all. And if you try and describe your strange version of a cat, you will call it fluffy because you've been taught that the texture of a steampunk armadillo shell is fluffy or cute because that's what you think it is, and we should respect all things, including fire-breathing steampunk armadillos. So there's no one right reality. If anyone knows the name for this, please tell me so I don't have to call it the fire-breathing steampunk armadillo theory. Story 23. To me, the most mind-blowing thing is the idea that the smallest change can have such a huge impact on the future and fate of human civilization. Like a rock moving from one place to another, maybe someone important or someone important to someone important and so on, steps on that rock and slips and gets hurt or dies. The trauma that can cause can influence a person's decision making, which can influence the course of human history. Something small and seemingly inconsequential can, and by the butterfly effect, swell into possibly the most important thing that happens in the fate of human civilization. I know this isn't a question, but it's definitely mind blowing. Gives meaning to every little thing you do in life. Story 24. Theoretically, no experiment can ever truly be repeated because it is not possible to repeat the variable of time. That experiment is only true for that specific moment in time. Therefore, doing the same exact experiment, even if you do everything exactly the same, could lead to a different result, because it is not the same experiment as before, due to time not being the same. We just tend to assume time itself does not influence an experiment, but we don't actually know that as it's really not provable. Better hope gravity works the same tomorrow. Story 25. I always had a hard time understanding how the four natural forces, weak or strong nuclear, electromagnetism, and gravity, are exactly where they need to be for everything to exist. Science says there are infinite universes, and we happen to live in the one where everything is perfect for matter to do its thing. I think of myself as a logic driven person and definitely don't believe in any religion. However, the universe seems to point to an intelligent creator with a beginning and an end. I'm not saying any of our religions on Earth are right or wrong, just that when you look at the evidence, it seems too much is perfect to be random. If you changed gravity, even a tiny fraction of a percent up, everything would fall into black holes, turn it down, and everything flies apart. Either we live in an infinite multiverse, where every possible universe happens, or our universe was intelligently designed,